slides in this to cover the cost of the people stuff. Good morning, everybody. How was your week or weeks? We talked about, I think in the first class I may have mentioned that I had read some Puritan prayers, and I have one, and I'm going to start off with that one this morning, but I just wanted to give it to you. This, if you wanted to see it again, it's called The Valley of Vision, and all it is a bunch of prayers, and some of them may be songs. They may not all be prayers, and some of them may be devotionals, but there's like, I think it's 200 pages of just, in each page is one prayer or poem or devotional type of thing. And this one is an evening prayer, and I figured I'd start off with this one because there's two things in here that I want to point out about how they looked at the mind. And one of them is, and I'll just read it to you. I desire to conquer myself in every respect, to overcome the body with its afflictions and lusts, and to keep under my flesh, it means keep control of his flesh, to guard my manhood from all gross sins, and to check the refining power of my natural mind, to live entirely to thy glory, to be deaf to unmerited censure and praise of men. So in there he's even talking about the mind, right? He's talking about making sure, and actually in this one, the natural mind, not the mind on God. And then he says, help me to gird up the loins of my mind, to keep quick my steps, to speed it up as if each moment were my last, that my life may be joy, my death be glory. And so in both of those, he's talking about one, suppressing the natural mind, which is, your sinful nature that we're all born with. But then he talks about girding up, helping his mind in the same aspect. So he's definitely talking about there's two different types of mind, although he's not really saying it specifically here. But that was in their prayers. And actually, as you go through this, almost every one of these prayers that I have gone through, it touches on the spiritual aspect. It talks about physical sins, and then it talks about the mental side of things as well. So I was going to start off with that today as our prayer. O lover of thy people, thou hast placed the whole being in the hands of Jesus, my Redeemer, Commander, Husband, Friend, and carest for me in him. Keep me holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners. May I not know the voice of strangers, but go to him where he is and follow where he leads. O Master, who didst wash the disciples' feet, be very patient with me. Be very condescending to my faults. Go on with me till thy great work is complete. I desire to conquer myself in every respect, to overcome the body with its afflictions and lusts, and to keep my flesh under, to guard my manhood from all grosser sins, to keep the refined power of the natural mind, to live entirely to thy glory, to be deaf to the unmerited censure and praise of men. Help me to gird up the loins of my mind, to quicken my step, to speed as if each moment were my last, that my life may be joy and my death glory. If thou dost make me right, I shall be right. Lord, I belong to thee. Make me worthy of thyself. Amen. A little bit longer than normal, but I thought it was really good. And so if you ever want to check that out, I think some of the stuff is on the internet, but this guy put together a collection of different things from different sources, so it's not all in one place. One other thing, since we've been talking about this, last week we talked about, and the week before a little bit, I think we talked about science versus religion, how some people see it as this. It's funny because National Geographic, here's the National Geographic in here, and it says the war on science is the first thing that it talks about. And then these are supposedly the things. Climate change doesn't exist. Evolution never happened. The moon landing was fake. Vaccinations can lead to autism. And genetically modified food is evil. So these are the topics that they think that there is this unintellectual attack against science. But you notice how in there, like specifically like the evolution one, they put in crackpot ideas like we never went to the moon, right? So they're kind of making everybody look like, oh, if you don't believe in evolution, then you're just as loony as somebody who doesn't believe we went to the moon. I mean, it's a very subtle message, but this is what they're kind of saying, right? And so it's funny. I buy anything like this that I see so I can go through it and read through it and see what they say and come up with it. But most of the stuff that they say in there, I mean, it's like fringe people and what fringe people say about stuff like the moon landing. I didn't even think people didn't think it happened. But there's actually people that think the moon landing didn't happen. So even though we have eyewitnesses who were on the moon, who've come back and testified that they've been on the moon, we have photographs of it, and they still think that it's a government conspiracy.
Well, there are all these people that are saying the Holocaust never happened. And the atrocities around the world in different places. If I didn't see it myself, then it didn't happen.
And that's an unreliable epistemology, which is a way of knowing things. It's unreliable to say, well, just because I haven't seen it, it doesn't exist.
Or they don't want to believe it. I don't know. I don't know what to believe.
Well, a lot of times with that, especially with Holocaust deniers, because like Iran denies the Holocaust, but on the other side, they also call for the destruction of the state of Israel. And many of the fundamentalist Muslims are talking about killing every Christian and every Muslim. So it's kind of hard to really buy into their thing saying that they don't believe the Holocaust happened as much as they believe that it did happen and that it was a good thing. Right? But you can't really say that, now can you? Well, politically you can't say it, but think about this. In their mind, if they really believed that, they would have to say, oh, gee whiz, that sounds really bad. Maybe I shouldn't believe that. Maybe something's wrong with what I believe. But if they can deny it, and say, oh, it never happened, then it's this, then it's not, then they don't have what we call cognitive dissonance. And that's when your brain is saying something that you know isn't true, and your brain tries to deal with the fact there's a tension there between reality and what you think. And they call that cognitive dissonance. And actually, it's like a psychological thing where people get to the point where they're denying something that they know is true. And so their brain is trying to deal with this apparent contradiction. Because your mind doesn't like contradictions, which is an interesting thing. God created our minds to focus in on truth. And when we don't focus on truth, our mind does weird things to us. So this is an interesting thing. And so today I wanted to start off, like last week we listened to that atheist. And if you missed it, I gave you a little card. There's a website there, and I'll show you on the website where you can go to. You can watch the recording from last week. And one of the things is we listened to we watched a video of some kids. That's not in the recording because I don't have permission from the kid's parents, so I'm not going to put it in there. But we listened to kids about how they thought about the Bible and how they thought it was reliable. And then we listened to an atheist who wrote a book called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And basically what he was saying is, look, most Christians don't believe based upon evidence in Christianity. They believe based upon emotion. So we don't even have to present evidence against Christianity. We just have to attack their emotional understanding of faith. And he says, I want to raise up 10,000 people to even go out and sit in front of church when people come out to start asking them those hard questions that they can't answer. So this is a direct attack against Christians. They don't want, and he says, I don't want people to become atheists. I want them to think correctly, and if they do, they're going to become atheists. Right? Well, I beg to differ. I believe if you're thinking correctly, you're going to become a Christian. And in fact, a lot of atheists that have become Christian. So that would be my contention with what he says. But so it's interesting. That's in there, and you can listen to that. And then we had a little bit of a discussion about it. Today, I wanted to talk about music and how music influences the way we listen and hear things and what we become to believe stuff. So a very popular song is the song called Happy by Pharrell Williams. Have any of you heard of it? You probably heard it. If you saw Despicable Me 2, the cartoon, if you have grandkids, you've probably seen it, or if you got kids, you may have seen it. And so it's a very popular song. They sing it at the Grammys and other award shows, and it's in the top 40. So this is a very popular song. And the interesting thing about it is it's got a really nice beat to it, right? It's one of those toe-tapping songs that you can really get into. But then we don't critically think about what is actually being said in the song. So I want to show you the lyrics, and I want to talk about what the lyrics say and see what you think. And so this is the lyrics. It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can't take a break. You can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With all that air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy, Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth, because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you're going to do. And there's more words to that, but we'll come back to those ones. I just wanted to start with these first words, and there's two things in there that just should pop out at you. What do you think in there?
Happiness is truth.
Yeah, clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. No, so the question is, so what they're saying is, if it makes you happy, it's what's true. Now, is that the definition of truth that you use?
Was the guy sober when he wrote it?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. So, happiness is the truth. Now, if you think about that, if a doctor comes into you and says, you have cancer, is that going to make you happy? But it's the truth, right? It may be the truth. And if it's the truth, you would want to know the truth, right? So sometimes, I guess the lesson there is, sometimes the truth doesn't make you happy. But it's something that we need to deal with. Because if a doctor comes in and says, you got cancer, we can deal with it, we need to do something like that, going, well, that doesn't make me happy, man, I don't want to hear about it. Kind of sounds almost like a hippie type of thing, right, man? You're harsh and my mellow, right? And the problem, if you look at happiness as truth, that really gets into a relativistic type of view of truth, instead of truth being based on what is real, right? And another one in here, anyone see anything else in there?
I'm a hot air balloon.
You know, how do you interpret that? What does that mean to you? Just that it's silly?
Well, it sounds silly, but who knows? You know, like where
Because hot air to me makes no sense. It's just hot air.
That's a good point.
It's a metaphor.
A metaphor for
High.
being high?
Yes.
It's a metaphor for being high. So there you go. That's another thing about it. So now, that being true, I'm going to take her at her word for this, because I think it probably is. Then this is just another song that's also promoting drug use, right?
Like most of the stuff. And I can only say this, and would only say it because the music business was my first career. I was a songwriter. I used to promote music like this, and we would work metaphorically a lot to say various things. And I recently went to a music concert, a rap concert, where at a venue where I used to promote in Oakland, and I was standing around and I was looking, and I thought I was going to be the oldest person in the crowd, but I was actually there working, and I wasn't. The main, the headliner was actually the oldest person in the club. And I'm looking around at all of these kids, and we're talking like 25, 26. I don't think anybody else over there was like 30.
Ma'am?
Yes.
If you want the rest of the class to hear, you're going to have to speak up
Oh,
or
okay.
don't speak down. I have hearing aids and I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I've been accused of being very soft-spoken. So their main thing, the audience that this type of music is directed at, their main thing is finding outside influences to make them happy. And a lot of that has to do with the synthetic drugs and alcohol, and it's a lifestyle that they're promoting these days in music.
Yeah, so she was just saying, if you didn't catch all that she was in the music industry, and a lot of what they write when songs is to promote drug use and just being happy. A short one-word thing for that is called hedonism, right? Whatever makes you happy, do it. Anything else that strikes you in this lyrics?
I thought maybe the phrase, you can take a break. Sunshine's here. You can take a break. So it's kind of like whatever you're into elsewise, just put that aside. We're going to go into this hot air
Yeah, so so you're saying that it's kind of like
Put aside your mind, put aside common
take your
sense,
responsibilities, put it aside.
everything.
Gotcha.
Take a break.
Yeah, take a break. Take a break of thinking critically too, right?
Yeah.
Because we're going to tell you that drugs are good, and if it makes you happy, it's truth. Now, here's the thing. Like she said, most of the people that are at the clubs listening to songs like this are in their early 20s. And so you got this really good song, toe-tapping song, telling you that it's okay to use drugs, subliminally kind of telling you that. And maybe subliminally is not the right word to use, but it's more of what we call a meta message. So what's the overall message of this song, right? Another thing in here, freedom. Yeah, freedom without responsibility, right?
Yeah. Like I am hot air balloon that could go into space. In other words, he's describing the whole thing, and he's using the hot air to lift to space. Then it says, with the air blank, I don't care, maybe I'm on my way. In other words, okay, I'm coming to you.
Right.
Using the air balloon as a place to use as a vehicle.
Correct. And also saying I don't care too. That you'll also notice in the younger generation, and even my generation, people, they have a certain level of apathy towards things. They just don't care, right? They care about what makes them feel good. They don't care about anything else. They don't care about Christ's kingdom. They don't care about using their mind for God. They don't care about all those other things. And it's hard when someone's been apathetic towards all of that to try and engender in them, one, that there's a responsibility, and two, that this is a good thing to do. And we'll talk about how that comes about.
Or the way that word is with care, like I don't care, I think he needed something to run with.
Yeah. That could be too.
Care.
That happens a lot.
So I think he just used that and says, okay, with the air, like I don't care. In other words, baby, I'm by the way.
Yeah.
In other words, I think he wanted to use something to fill it with.
Yeah. Anything else?
Not that way.
We went to the rhyming dictionary.
We went to the rhyming dictionary.
I'm just thinking about an individual I know who was an alcoholic and a very into dance and, you know, she's a very sanguine individual anyway, and then she gets bizarre with her alcoholism, and it never occurs to her, now she's going to move and it's going to change the whole environment for her, of her friends and the accessibility of the dance hall and the club and that kind of thing. And she's about to fall apart because that was her happiness. Those individuals who came by her house for a drink or for a meal or whatever, and that atmosphere that she had created was the whole of her life.
Right.
Now she's got to start over. And it doesn't look like a similar community. And so the thought that maybe her happiness ought to come from the inside
Right.
is just totally missing.
Yeah, I think that is one of the problems that we have with people being apathetic to everything else. They think they found happiness, but they really haven't found happiness.
Right.
Right? It's not a happiness that lasts. It's a happiness that is until the bottom of that drink, and then it's over, right? Or while my friends are here, or while I'm high. As soon as that happiness is over, then it's like really bad depression.
Yes.
And so you'll have people that are up and down, up and down, up and down. And when they're down, all they think about, because they're depressed, is how do I get happy again? And really, if you think about, most of the drugs that everybody takes are mind-altering drugs. It is because their brains are knowing that this lifestyle doesn't work for me. This is the really interesting thing about this. God has made our brains to react in certain ways. And so we know that this doesn't make sense and that this doesn't bring a true happiness. And then we get depressed about it. And we just try to medicate it. We try to put a Band-Aid on something like, skin cancer. That doesn't, it only covers it up. It hides it. It doesn't actually deal with the root problem. And I think that's what we have to help people with.
Why do you think we done movies?
Same reason, to escape. Yeah.
Because we know that life on this earth has its rejoice and have some sorrow. And when we want to feel joy, and there's a good movie out, sometimes for 3 hours or 2 hours, we take ourselves into that character that we focus on and go, God, I wish that was all the time.
Yeah, if you watch most movies, you know, there's all, you know why the movies that sell, that get the most amount of money, are the ones that have the happy ending. That there's some kind of struggle and then there's a happy ending. That's the movies that everybody likes. Nobody likes the downer movies that everybody's dead at the end or something like that. Everybody's just like, I don't like that movie. And in fact, a lot of movies, if you read the stories, like the main character saves everything but dies in the process. And oftentimes in some movies they'll show you the alternate ending where it has the person where they don't die. But that's not the one that ever goes to the movie theaters. It's the one where he doesn't die, he lives, and he's the hero. The one where he does die, that one's the one that's cut from the movies. I watched a movie last night. It was the Live, Die, Repeat. It's Tom Cruise, and it's almost like a video game. He's going through this thing, and he dies, and he wakes back up, and then he starts over until he gets it right. And it's a science fiction thing.
Oh,
And
that's a science fiction.
yeah. So at the end, he's dying. He's giving his life to end the whole entire thing, save the earth and all that kind of stuff. But they couldn't let that just be the end of the movie. So he wakes up again earlier than it was when he's normally been waking up, and he finds out that the aliens have been already killed. And he remembers how he killed them. So I don't know. I was kind of disappointed in the ending because I thought that it would have been noble for him to die, and that would have just been the end. I would have been fine with that. I know that it probably wouldn't have sold movies, but in reality, having been a Marine, never been in combat, but having been a Marine, you know that when you're in the military that you may go and never come back. You may have to give your life.
Right.
And so to me that's realistic if you die and then that's just the end of it. It could have been more realistic if he died and the aliens didn't die and it didn't do any good, but that's a little too futile for people and nobody would watch that kind of a movie, right? So the rest of the lyrics, I think we got a lot of good stuff in those, but here, this one he says, here come bad news talking this and that, yeah. Well, give me all you got and don't hold back, yeah. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll just be fine, yeah. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Bring me down, can't... So he's saying basically, go ahead, tell me whatever you're going to tell me, but it's not going to bring me down because I don't really care. I'm going to be high, and I'm just not going to care. And nothing you say is going to bring me down because I'm not really listening, right? Because that's not my... Yeah, it is very much so evil. In fact, I can't listen to it anymore. I mean, it's got a really good tone, but every time I hear it, it's like fingers on a chalkboard.
Oh, you can't understand when he's singing it.
No, you
It
can't.
has a to even know what the words are, except for the happy chorus, and then of course the beat, which I like. It makes you want to
He
dance.
says in the movie, like, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. I don't care what you say. Go on.
Yeah. That's it.
And he says in this one, my level's too high, can't bring me down, can't nothing bring me down. And he just keeps on saying it over and over and over again. And that's another thing too. You know, in the ancient times, when they didn't have writing, what would they do to learn, like, you know, stories and stuff like that? They'd repeat them over and over and over, and they would make them lyrical. Because your mind will remember the lyrics more than it will the words.
Yes.
And if you put the words with the with the music, you put those two together, you will remember it very well. And that's the interesting thing. It's very, very, very powerful. And in fact, people know this. The Nazis knew this, and so they had a lot of nationalist songs that they used to spread their propaganda. Soviet Union did the same thing. China does the same thing. Some people say America does it, but it's not really an organized thing, I don't think. So I wouldn't go that far. But
Hollywood is an organized.
what?
Hollywood is an organized function.
Yeah.
They're programming society with their messages.
Yeah.
Just the words. Carol and I were listening. I've listened to it way too many times because of my grandson. The movie Frozen we've watched many times, and the main song that she sings. Yeah, I mean, it's all about, don't let it, I can't even remember the words
Yeah.
now. I'd have to pull my phone up. But it's all about me. And I can be whatever. I don't have to hold anything in anymore. I'm free to be me. And I don't care what anybody else does. Me being me is more important than anything else.
Right.
Very similar, not exact, but very similar to the type of message
Yeah.
that's being presented. And it's little ones that are getting kind of programmed
Right.
into it.
Well, I don't think it's not really like an organized thing. It's not like Hollywood sitting up here like, let's brainwash the population. It's the fact that we live in an anti-intellectual
The culture.
society. They have no idea what they're listening to. They have no idea what they're getting themselves into because they don't care to learn.
Well, and I think that's probably true, because Pharrell Williams wrote this. I don't think that he's sitting in the back of his thing saying, okay, how am I going to sell hedonism to everybody today? He's just a hedonist singing hedonist songs. That's just the way he is. So, but that's the problem, is if you look at, and I wouldn't say the tabloids are necessarily a good place to go look for information, but even if you just look at the mainstream news and you look at everybody's death that's in Hollywood, what have their deaths been around?
Depression.
Drugs, right? Most of it is self-medicated for their hedonism, whatever that is, right? Michael Jackson died from an overdose of something because he couldn't get to sleep at night. Again, his brain was telling him that what you're doing is wrong, and that's why you can't sleep. And then he medicated himself until he died. Elvis, same thing. I mean, you can go through everybody else, and if you look at things like what Miley Cyrus, as soon as she's old enough, now look at all the stuff that she's doing. She just became crazy all of a sudden. Right? And so she's giving into that hedonism. That's the worst part about Hollywood, is because if you become popular and all of a sudden you have a lot of money, then there's almost nothing you can't have. You want drugs? You can buy them. You want that brand new car because you think that's going to make you feel good? You go and buy it. Problem is, it still doesn't make them feel good. And then they end up in
It's funny.
self-destructive.
You wouldn't think that hedonism would be the road down to depression, would you? But it is.
Yeah, well, yeah, you got a good point there. Well, because it's based on something that's not true. And what is truth? We all know what truth is, right? Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, right? This is the difference, because we were designed to be in God's service, right? And when we're not in God's service, then there's this hole in our lives. And we know that there's a hole in our lives. And we try to fill it with all these other things that we can come up with. And it just doesn't work. And so when I listen to something like this that Pharrell Williams does, I don't envy him. I can envy him because he's a very rich man. He's on a lot of TV shows now. He's on The Voice, and he's all this other stuff. But his life must be really empty. And he's somebody that needs Jesus, really, is what it comes down to. But that hedonism is so much into his life, and so much into all the lives of the people in Hollywood. You oftentimes wonder, can they really even function if they were in a normal society? That would be a really good reality show. Drop Hollywood actors and artists off in a farm in Iowa. You have to work this farm or you don't eat. I'd like to see that one. That would be a reality show I would watch.
But they've been elevated by society.
Oh, yeah.
And so therefore they get to a point that they believe that press, that they are.
Oh, yeah. They believe that they're better than everybody else. Why? Because every time they go into a restaurant or someplace like that, everybody's like, oh, Mr. Williams, how can I help you? And they do all this stuff. But Robin Williams, brilliant comedian, killed himself because he was depressed. He had it all. According to what the world said.
Well, if the world's right, they had it all, and so did every other celebrity. And
Yeah.
killing themselves.
And he still killed himself out of depression. So they get it all, what they think is really good, and then a lot of the regular population, like us, the poor people or whatever, we look to them and we say, oh, I'd love to be like that. They seem to have it all. They don't have it. Once they get it all.
Never judge a book by its cover.
Right. Absolutely. So this brings me to the next point, and about being a double-minded person. And there's two levels of this. One is entertaining two thoughts within your mind or two beliefs within your mind that contradict one another. And two, Sunday morning saying Jesus Christ is God. Monday morning when you're at work, he's not. Right? And so that's living a life where there's two different aspects to your life of what I would say a false dichotomy. And so having the belief that Jesus is God has certain moral implications to it, right? Jesus gave us a lot of moral imperatives. Love thy neighbor as thyself and all that kind of stuff. And then having the idea that a lot of Christians seem to have this day, that everybody's morality is equally valid. That's what they say. They don't, and they may even act like that when they're at work, right? But here's the thing. What if Christianity is true? That means Jesus Christ is true. That means he gave us moral imperatives that we're supposed to follow. That means Monday morning when we go to work, do those moral imperatives stop?
If they're going to make me unpopular.
Possibly, right? I mean, that's what a lot of people do.
They become two people.
Or peer pressure. I had this once. I was working as a loan officer back in the early 90s, before I got into computers. And went to work one day, and one of the guys there was telling me, hey, you're a notary, right? And I said, yes, I'm a notary. And he says, well, we need you to notarize this guy's loan documents. And I said, okay. And so they just gave me the documents, and the guy had already signed them. I said, well, I can't notarize this. I need to see the person. I need to, well, he's in a hospital bed right now, and he's barely conscious. I'm like, well, I can't notarize that because they're not in their right mind. I don't know that they're in their right mind, and I don't feel comfortable signing something saying that he signed this and that he was aware of what he was signing. And so I stuck to my guns. This would be the wrong thing to do. And the guy that worked there told me, he says, you know what? He says, I'm going to stab you in the gut and leave you in a ditch. And I said, you know what? That's too bad. But I'm not signing it because that's against the law. I went and packed my stuff up, and I left. But then I called him and told him I quit because I wasn't staying there after he told me he was going to stab me in the gut and leave me in a ditch. Never saw the guy again. But you think about this. We say Jesus Christ is God, and he says obey the laws and all that kind of stuff, and then you get into situations where somebody says, hey, I made a copy of this movie, here, I'm going to give it to you. Or here, you can buy it for $5 and it's just a copy and I'll give it to you. And how many people do that kind of stuff? Or they download it off the internet for free and stuff like that. It doesn't hurt anybody. It's not a matter of whether it hurts somebody or not. It does have an impact on somebody. Somebody's not getting paid for it or whatever it is. But it's against the law. And Jesus said, obey the law. Especially in something like that. Jesus would not say, oh yeah, go ahead, download all those movies that are bad for you anyways, because you don't want to pay for them. But a lot of Christians will go out there and they'll just say, well, this is just a little thing. It's like a little white lie type of thing. It's no big deal. But again, this is having that double-minded thing. That's acting as if Jesus isn't God, as if he isn't real. That's pretending like when he says obey the law, it doesn't matter. Or when Paul said it or whatever. So, what would follow if Jesus Christ wasn't God? Right? What morality would follow? Well, it would kind of depend, right? But you could come to the conclusion that everybody's morality is just about the same as everybody else's, if there is no God, right? And in which case, then you could say, yeah, whatever makes you feel happy might be one way to put it, as we've seen earlier. So how does our view of reality influence our decisions and our actions in our lives? And I'm guilty of it too. I'm guilty of it all the time. I notice it, and it annoys me sometimes because I know that Jesus Christ is God. I know there's certain morality. I know there's certain things that are true and honest and things that I should do, and I don't always live up to those standards. But I try to get better. I mean, that's the whole process of sanctification, right? So don't feel bad because everybody's in this boat. Because we have a natural mind, like they were talking about here in the Puritans, or a sin nature that we have. And we have a new nature that is given to us by the Holy Spirit. And through the process of renewing our mind, we go through the sanctification process. So, as long as we're on earth, we're going to have both of these things warring inside of our heads. The question is, which one are we going to allow to be dominant? And you may have heard this story before, and it's a little analogy, a little story, and it fits really well with here. And it's about a Cherokee tribal leader, and he says, some kid asked him one day about, why is it there's good and evil in me, and why does one win or the other one doesn't? And the Cherokee chief said, it's like two wolves, and they're fighting with each other. And he says, and one's good and one's bad. He says, well, how do I make sure the good one wins? He says, the one you feed is the one that will win. Right? Paul talks about this too in his letters when he says, there's a war within me. He says, the things I want to do, I don't do, and the things I should do, I don't. And he recognizes that war. An interesting thing too, another very famous artist out there is called Linkin Park. And they actually did a song about that. It's called Crawling. If you listen to the song, they're not Christian by any means, but they recognize this war within themselves. They don't know the answer, and the song doesn't give you the answer to it. But this war that's inside of you, the good versus the bad that you're fighting with, they fully understand it in the song. If you look through the lyrics, you can find it there. And so sometimes the lyrics are really good to talk to people about stuff, because they found the problem, they just don't know what the solution is. And so if you ever talk to some kids about that, you can say, what do you think this song means? And you go through it. Like we kind of talked about the Pharrell song, what does this mean? Then you can start talking about, well, here's what the truth is. And then you can go through that process. So we have these two things in our mind and what can happen. So sometimes people in their private life will confess Jesus Christ, but in their public life, they live as if he's not God. Right? And I'll see this at work all the time. Most of the people in my office, probably 90% of them would say they're Christian. But the activities that some of them do, I would say, how does anyone know that you're a Christian? Like Bob, I think Bob brought it up last week about a coworker that he had, where he told the person, he says, well, I didn't know that you were a Christian. There was no fruit in your life. How was I supposed to know? And sometimes in some people, I can give you plenty of examples of the fruit in their life is not fruit of Jesus, but fruit of the opposite, that there is no God, or of hedonism or relativism or whatever it is. So people try to compartmentalize their lives, and they try to say work's one place, sphere of influence, I'm going to act a certain way at work. When I go to school, I'm going to act this way. When I go to church, I'm going to act this way. And depending upon where I am, I'm going to act differently. Now, and that's not to say that there's a certain time and a certain place for certain things, because certainly most people say wearing shorts to church maybe is not appropriate. But that's more of is that a time and a place for things? Wearing shorts, there's nothing wrong with that. Wearing at church, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It just kind of depends. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you compartmentalize your life, where you're a cheat and a steal at work. When you go to church, you say, oh, that's all wrong. You shouldn't be a cheat and a steal. Right? So there's this difference there. And obviously I'm not saying on low-level type cultural things, I guess, like wearing shorts maybe is a cultural thing. If it's hot enough, maybe you should, right?
I was just thinking, how in the world do we let people know at work? From my previous experience in the work world. And one of the things is when a decision needs to be made, to say, I need to pray about this. Just to let them know that you've got a connection that's more important than your own opinion. And then come back with your decision.
Right.
But
that's a way to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
That 100% of the Lord one.
Oh, did it?
Ultimately.
Oh, awesome.
Starting with that.
I think that's a good example. I'm not sure how, like people at my work know that I'm a Christian, but they all do.
Uh-huh.
And I've been called Bible thumper, and I've been called all kinds of things, and they think of that as a rude thing, but I think of it as like a badge of honor. That's fine. Call me a Bible thumper all you want. But in fact, one of the guys, a friend of mine, he's Catholic, and he's always telling me, he says, I read the book of Mark once, that's all I need to do. He says, why do you read the Bible over and over and over and over again? I'm like, what do you mean, why do I read it all over? I don't fully understand it. Well, you get the gist of it, right? I'm like, well, yeah, I get the gist of it, but that's not the point. There's so many areas in my life that, and I think what he doesn't understand either is that in computer technology, we have a term said garbage in, garbage out. So if you put garbage into the computer, when it's going to do its process, garbage is going to come out. If you put good stuff in, it's going to do its process, good stuff comes out, right? I think it's the same thing with our brains. Garbage in, garbage out. Whatever comes in through our eyes or through our ears influences our mind, and if it's garbage, then garbage is what's going to come out of our mouth and our actions, right?
For every action, there will be a
Right.
simple physics.
Yeah. So if we put garbage in, garbage is going to come out. And I think that that's what he doesn't understand, is because I'm trying to increase my intake of good so that what comes out in my actions would be good. Like he said, it's just it's a simple formula, in and outs.
What you put into it, what you get out of it.
Right. So I think we talked about this too. It's very much like a diet. Your mind is like a diet. So what are you feeding your mind through your eyes and through your ears? What do you feed it? Twinkies? Right? So take it back to the food thing. Is it all junk food? Then what's going to come out of your body? Your body's going to have high cholesterol, blood pressure, all the bad things that are in the shortening your life here on earth, right? So same thing with your mind. So for me, I want good stuff in there. So when I'm really down and out and blue, or I had a panic attack or something like that, I just started listening to the Bible all the time. And they went away. So I changed my intake and outtake. In fact, even when I sleep, I listen to the Bible. In fact, actually, you get really weird dreams when you're listening to the book of Revelation. I'm just telling you right now. But other than that, I've noticed that.
Take notes afterwards?
No, it's just really bizarre sometimes. But no, I mean, and it's really good. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm just listening to something. Oh, wow, that's really cool. And then I fall back asleep. And then the next morning I remember that. It's like, oh, that was really cool. And then I have no idea where it was in the Bible. But again, garbage in, garbage out. So I have a tendency to not listen to things like Pharrell's song, not because it's not a good sounding song, but because the message, I just can't handle it. And I listen to more uplifting songs, either Christian music. There is some country music out there that's really good. Like, Randy Travis did that song, Point of Light. That's a really good song. It has a good message. There's nothing that contradicts the Christian worldview with that. In fact, I think it aligns very nicely with it. Obviously, I'm not going to read the ones that talk about drinking and my dog died and my truck broke and all that kind of stuff, because that, again, that garbage in, garbage out, right? Now, am I saying never eat a Twinkie again? No, I mean, doctors will tell you if you want to have a good diet, a good healthy diet, you can't cut out all the bad stuff all the time. Two reasons why you can't cut out the intellectual Twinkies, so to speak. If you cut them out, then you're going to be completely disconnected from culture.
Yes.
Right? So I want to talk to people about Pharrell's song. So I'm going to have to know what Pharrell's song says. So I'm going to have to, but now I'm looking at it critically. I'm dissecting it. Right? And now I know what it really is. So I'm not really consuming it, right? It's a little bit different. So that's the one thing that I would talk about. A really good statement, I think, that was made. I mentioned this last week. Remember DC Talk? It's a Christian group that was a few years ago. They said something, and it said the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That's powerful. That convicted me when I heard it back in the 90s. I mean, ever since then, I just remember that. It's not like it's a haunting word, but it's a word that is definitely reminded me all the time. Every time that I'm in a situation where I might be not the best ambassador for Christ, this comes up to me and it reminds me that if I'm an ambassador for Christ and I'm doing this with my lifestyle, that brings discredit to him. And then, why? And that's a bad thing, and I feel really bad about the times that I've done it, because I've done stuff that has probably hurt people's chances of coming to Christ, because I wasn't the ambassador that I should have been. And unfortunately, sometimes you can't go back and rebuild those bridges, because you may have burned them.
Something you do, it could be something that you don't do. Because if you profess to be a Christian and somebody's hurting and you go, oh, I can't deal with that today, you know, and you just kind of back off and you don't approach them. Something could be a coworker who's not a Christian, and or their husband died, or you know, it could be anything. It could be something you don't do.
Right.
That,
Action or inaction, right?
yeah.
And that's the hardest ones, because how many times do you drive by a homeless person not do anything because you think they're a bum, and they're not a bum in the sense that they're poor, but in the sense that they're probably just fleecing people for money, right? And I don't think just handing the money outside the car window really helps the person, right? It seems like they need to get to a shelter, they need to get someplace to get their life back together. A lot of those people don't want that help, but I'm judging them before I even see them. I just assume that they don't want the help, right? And that one bothers me all the time, because there's so many charlatans out there. In fact, the street just up here, just past Wendy's, that little street that comes in there, we were going through Wendy's. It was after church, and we stopped by Wendy's to get something. Oh, junk food. Sorry.
They have good salad.
Yeah.
But you have to stop going.
Yeah, I have the salad. So we went through the drive-thru, and as I saw there, I saw this caravan parked there. It's a newer car. It looked like it was a wreck. And what drew my attention to it was these 3 or 4 bare feet people were standing there, and one guy was taking his shoes off. He put them in the car, and he went and grabbed a sign, and then one walked out and was panhandling on the corner, on the off-ramp or whatever it is that you come from, or if you're coming from the Mormon church or whatever it is, that little street there. They were panhandling on the corner there, but he had shoes. Why did he take his shoes off to walk out there? Right. So now, every time I see people on the corner, I'm really jaded about it, and I don't want to help them. Because I think, well, they're just a bunch of flim-flam people. And it's not that there isn't food or things like Bob works at the place where we feed people and all that stuff. Right. So it's not like we're not doing things for them, you know, and I give money when they ask for special money for the envelopes for that. But so for me, I think that's kind of like the thing that is the better way to do it. But I don't know. Sometimes it would be worth it maybe to stop, talk to the people, get to know them and all that kind of stuff. There's somebody that Jesus Christ loves too. And that's the hard part. A friend of mine does foster care, and one of the people that, one of the kids they got into foster care was people that they call themselves gypsies. Now, I don't know if they're genetically descended from gypsies or not, but they had come to the Brentwood area, and they were doing that type of panhandling, and Child Protective Services took the child away because, you know, having the kid out on the middle of the street is putting the kid in danger, and so they took the kid away for that reason. Not that the parents didn't love the kid or didn't take care of the kids, because as my friend was fostering him, he said, no, they loved him. They came and visited him all the time. They brought her food, clothes, all this stuff. It wasn't that they weren't caring for her, but because they were in the act of committing a crime and the kid was there, because it's technically a crime to do that, they took the kid into Child Protective Custody. Now, the kid has since gone back. They had him for maybe like 6 months, almost a year. And hopefully the parents get the help that they need to not have to live that lifestyle. But again, anyways. So I think sometimes that we see the way people abuse the system, and then it turns us into not wanting to be the best ambassadors for Christ that we possibly could be. And it's a hard situation, because even when you're in a car, you can't really just stop, block traffic, and say, hey, why did you end up on the street? You know, tell me your story. You know, that type of thing. But it does remind me of the guy that was on the street. Was this a good movie where the guy was a violin player or something like that? Soloist or something like that. Yeah. And somebody met him on the street and then encouraged him to get back into the music, and then he got off the street because of so it can happen. And if God puts you in the right place at the right time, we have to be willing to listen. So what does this do in culture in general? It leads to kind of a moral confusion. When is something really true and moral and right, and when is it not? And so we have all kinds of things like this. So living this idea inside of our mind that, yes, Jesus Christ is God, but there is no absolute morality, or Jesus just wants me to be happy. to the maximum amount. That's what life's all about. Well, God has something to say about this. And he says it both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So I figured I'd pull from both because it seems like it's a double whammy when God says from the Old Testament and the New Testament, because it's like it's reaffirmed. But in Psalms 119, 113, he says, I hate double-minded people, but I love your law. And then in James 1:8, he's talking about a person, he says, is a double-minded person and he's unstable in all of his ways. If you think about that, if you're saying that Jesus Christ is God or there is morality or whatever that is, and then on the other side you're saying that he's not and you're living your life as if he doesn't exist when you're at work, then you are going to be unstable in all your ways. People very rightly will call you a hypocrite. And then like the DC Talk lyrics that we were talking about, they just won't believe that what you're saying is true. Now here's the thing. If somebody is a hypocrite, does that mean that they're wrong in what they're saying? So let's use an example. Let's say I'm a chain smoker. I'm not. I don't smoke. But let's say I'm a chain smoker. And then I tell you, smoking's bad for your health.
Well, you can know the fact. and
Right.
still be a
Right.
smoker.
Right. So then you come back and say, well, you're a hypocrite because you smoke a pack a day. I am a hypocrite because I am telling you that smoking's bad. I'm smoking a pack a day. I am a hypocrite about it. But does that mean what I said wasn't true?
No.
No, it's still true. But see, this is just human nature. They say, okay, if you think that's so true, but you don't live as if it's true, then maybe it's not as true as you're saying it is, or maybe you don't think that's really that important. I mean, that's what people are looking at, yeah.
Well, we're all on this walk. We're on this journey till our very last breath. And we're hopefully changing for the better.
Right.
But it takes time.
Right.
And what you struggle with might not be what the rest of us struggle with. So if we're looking at somebody saying they should eat better or dress better or talk better or not have their kids out panhandling or whatever, that may be their struggle.
Right.
They could actually be a believer and just have this area, this weakness or this difficulty that they need to work through.
Right.
And just because you might get to your non-smoking if you were a smoker, and it might take you a few months or a year or whatever, doesn't mean that somebody else who's trying, it might take them years.
Right.
So we have to be really careful because we don't know when we meet people, even if they say they're a Christian, they could have accepted Christ 5 minutes ago.
Right.
And until you get to know them, you don't know what their story is.
Right.
And we don't know if they've been discipled. We don't know if they've been, taught. We don't know anything.
Right. And I think that's what in the New Testament it very much talks about, focusing on the good things and exalting people in those things, teaching people sound doctrine. So all that discipleship stuff like you're talking about. And I think the point that I was trying to make was that if just because somebody's a hypocrite doesn't mean that they're not telling the truth, right? And again, like you said, we don't know people's story. So we don't know where they are, why they're where they're at. We need to love them like Christ loves them and come alongside them to help them in the direction that they need to go. And if you think about that, if somebody's a Christian and you can help them, you should come alongside them and help them. Right? And here's the funny thing. Wherever you are in your life, there's always Christians that they're struggling with stuff that you've overcome. And you can become a mentor for them. Take them in as your disciples to kind of show them what you've done. And understanding that I need mentors for myself because there's areas in my life where I still need to improve. And so I become a disciple of other people that mentor me. And so we're all at different places at different times. And I think if we realize that, we can help each other. Now, what about the non-Christian? Well, obviously, their biggest need is Jesus Christ, right? So we got to come alongside them and help them to come to know Christ. And so in one instance, we have where they're helping them get to know Jesus Christ. And if they already know Jesus Christ, we help them in the areas that we can help, realizing that we're just beggars as well, and we need to increase ourselves as well. And that's all what we're kind of talking about here, and what we'll talk about next week when we talk about the biblical view of the mind. It's all talking about sanctification. It's all about that process, about renewing our minds is a part of that process. Because if you want to change your actions, what do you need to do?
Change yourself.
You need to change the way you think about things, right? Then you can change your actions. You want to change your feelings. How do you do that? Your feelings respond to what you're thinking. And here's a very interesting thing. Medical science today understands this. They understand it very well. And the Bible talks about it back in the old days. But your emotions are following through from what you're thinking about, which is sometimes what goes through your eyes and through your ears. There's a natural response to input. And especially if you're not thinking about it, your mind's still thinking about whatever it is that you're seeing. This is why pornography is such a bad thing. Because it becomes very addictive, because it comes into your mind uncritically thinking about it, and it creates emotions, desires inside of you. Those desires then, in your brain, trigger off things like endorphins and stuff like that start to make you feel good. Again, it's another example of a cheap high, just like drinking alcohol would be another example, or smoking pot, or one of those other things. You're altering your mind and your chemistry within your mind to make yourself feel good. But it's only short-lived, right? And so this is what we're talking about, renewing your mind. And so if you have any struggles with these, because a lot of guys struggle with pornography and stuff like that, well, how do you deal with that? You have to change the way you think about it. And watching it's not going to help you change the way you think about it, right? So you have to get that out of your life, and then you got to change the way you think about that. And then you got to probably change the way you think about sex, probably change the way you think about women. There's a lot of things else that have to be changed the way you think about it in order to get that out of your life. Otherwise, once you get started on that path, it's really hard to get out of. It's like a rut that you get into, and it's hard to get out of. Any questions? Yes.
Another illustration would be, how do we think? What are our thoughts when we look at somebody who's obviously poor, who comes into our congregation? Do we recognize that that person might be a new believer or a seeker? And do we reach out to that person, or do we just get this emotional push? Stay away.
Well, think about this. You tailoring off of what you said. Let's say in Sunday you're sitting down there listening to Pastor Larry, and a gay couple sits right down next to you. Yeah. What would be your reaction? Yeah. Hopefully the reaction is, I love them just as Jesus loves them, and they need to know the Lord, so I want to make them to feel welcome here so that they can listen to. Because they're not going to change their homosexuality. You see, a lot of people want people to change their homosexual lifestyle, then come to Jesus. It doesn't work that way. You got to come to Christ, and the Holy Spirit's got to get into your life, and then from that time the process starts. It's never instantaneous, to renewing your mind. And some of those things take time. And sometimes people struggle with things for a long period of time in their lives. And same-sex attraction and stuff like that may take a long time, may take years. So if we're not being welcoming when someone comes in there, and I'm not saying they're not, I'm not saying that about our church, but some churches, they're definitely not welcome. They're asked to leave and stuff like that. And I know Pastor Larry has said multiple times from the pulpit, we welcome you. But do they feel welcomed based upon our actions within the congregation too? Because again, they're loved by Jesus Christ just like everybody else. And they're struggling with a culture that we live in where hedonism is king. Do whatever you want if it makes you feel happy. Right? And they probably have something in their lives that maybe a scar in their past that they have to get past too as a part of this process. They have to work on that as well. So there's a lot of things that have to happen, and we have to give the Holy Spirit time to work with them, and we can't push them away while we're trying to do that. That is not to say that we tell them, oh, what you're doing is completely fine, keep on doing it. You don't ever have to change. That wouldn't be the right thing to do. So we have to stick with what the truth is, and the truth is not what makes you feel happy, unfortunately. I mean, it would be really nice if the truth was always what made you feel happy, right? So I'll show you really quickly